like one of the things that I realized, because I was compiling the achievements of each BTS member and for 2024, and then I'm just going backwards, so I'm putting them in one sheet to sort of like collate everything. And for 2024 and even 2023, of course every member has their own achievement because they're all successful commercially and critically, but it's really skewed heavily towards Jimin and Jungkook, primarily because they are pop. So they are sort of their competition or other pop songs and pop stars as well. And so I felt so bad because I felt like it's unfair, for example, for an indie album like RPWP to be competing against Golden or Muse for that matter, because they're two different genres. And one of the things that's becoming harder is that regardless of the real and actual genre of K-pop artists, they're always classified as K-pop, and that is taking away from the credibility and the appreciation for what they actually do. I know that I have continuously and constantly nag people about RPWP because I feel like it is. I mean, I love all BTS members equally, but I do feel that RPWP deserves at least a Record of the Year nomination in the Grammys. But he didn't get it because he's being labeled K-pop. So I was thinking, like, it's so unfair because it's an indie album for in all the ways that matter. It's an indie album, and the only thing that made it K-pop is that Namjoon or RM was a K-pop idol. He's just now an artist for me, not anymore a K-pop idol. So I was thinking, like, my God, is Bang Shiyuk actually correct when he first said maybe we need to take away K in K-pop because that is going to help artists get the recognition or the classification that they actually deserve. That was a thought that came into my head. Now the question is, why is it so important anyway? Why does it matter for the US market or the Western market in general to recognize idols for what they actually sell or the actual category or the actual genre that they are singing? And the reason is very simple. It's because it is the largest music industry, music market in the world. And it's not even close. The closest is actually Japan, and it's pretty amazing considering Japan is so small. But if you look at everything, like USA overpowers all the other music market. So we do want artists to be able to sustain or pay for their own living using their own art. So the best way to do that is to capture the US market. And I know that I talk a lot of trash about the US market. But the truth is that it is actually one of the most accommodating markets in the world. I mean, we're still struggling in Europe, but we're way more Korea, South Korea. Many Asian artists are actually way more established in the US than they are in UK. That's still even harder to penetrate. So if it makes sense from a commercial, commercial and cultural point of view, it makes sense for us to try and plant ourselves more stable to become more stable in the US market. Um, I also just wanted to share that these are the biggest streaming platforms: Spotify, Apple Music, Amazon Music, Tencent. This is global, by the way. YouTube Music, NetEase, Deezer, Yandex, and others. So Spotify is the biggest, although yeah, it's 31% of the entire market. And then next is Apple Music at 15%. Amazon Music is 13%. And this is actually a brilliant move for Amazon because almost everybody is already using Amazon in the US. So why not also introduce Amazon Music? Um, okay, now one of the there are different ways on how to make people who appreciate the actual genre and the actual quality of the songs that idols are actually making, like Namjoon, RM, or Suga, and the rest of BTS members. And one of that is through the Grammys. And it's actually not impossible because although Grammy started as a local award show, it has evolved to claim global recognition because the US is considered a melting pot of different cultures. I know that for many of you who actually live here in the US, you know that like many people would actually say like being an American is not really, we're not homogeneous. So it's like different races, different cultures. The very first winner, non-English song that won was from Domenico Modugno, and he won Record of the Year and Song of the Year from this with the song Volare, and it was the first Grammy Awards in 1958. And this was when they were still recognizing the actual the actual quality of the song instead of popularity. So, however, to date, there's still the only Volare is still the only foreign language song to win either the Record of the Year or Song of the Year. It was also a top hit in Billboard Hot 100 for 5 weeks in 1958. Um, the thing is that since then there has been some sort of a conscious effort to create categories for different cultures. So, for example, for there is a Latin Grammy, and as we know, like Latinos have been in the US for a really long time, and they are the second most. The Spanish is the second most spoken language in the US, and despite that, there it's still very very seldom that a Latin song would actually get nominated in the Grammys. So I think there's since the first Grammy Awards in 1958, there's an effort to try and make it a bit more local, make Grammys more local. So um, the only way I'm seeing it is for the K to be dropped. For singers like or artists like RM and Suga and J Hope and the rests to actually and the rest to actually be recognized for the quality of their song and not automatically be branded as K-pop is by dropping the K in K-pop. It's not easy though. As of today, it is actually accurate to say that no traditional boy band has ever won a Grammy Award. Um, there have been some boy band like groups to have received the nomination but never won. If people will consider the Beatles uh, a boy band, then they would be the ones. But other than that, it's easier for girl groups because girl groups have actually won Grammy Awards. So this is Destiny's Child. I'm sure that you know them. This is TLC. They're actually my favorite girl group of all time. So I feel like it's actually easier for girl groups and harder for boy bands. But um, there hasn't been any winner that is. It has been dominated by African Americans. This category. So maybe we have actually a better chance because Asians are actually considered people of color. You know, that's a factor in the Grammys, whether we like it or not. Also, it might be easier for idols to win in a non-pop category like jazz. So V actually has a chance. If they actually market him right, he may have a chance in the jazz category or even indie. So, but it will all start with the if we are able to actually drop K in K-pop. So I do understand that the major question is, or the major concern of people is that why should we bend to what they are doing instead of making them just appreciate the artistic value of K-pop? But as I've said, it all boils down to the fact that Grammy is, I think, they still see themselves as a local award. Like this is for traditional Like this is for the US. So we're gonna have to adjust to them if we if there is any chance for K-pop idols to get the recognition that they deserve. Now, I'm talking about Grammys because I believe that it's one way in. Like if you get any kind of award, it's going to be easier for you to go through to get accepted in the other aspects of the industry. Um, because certainly sales and streams aren't enough because BTS is one of the most successful in terms of sales and in terms of streams, but they're still not getting the kind of recognition that they deserve. There's still some stigma into it. There's so many nuances. There's so many considerations. There's so many questions and a lot of sentiments in that. I'm sure a lot of people will highly disagree because they feel like no, we shouldn't adjust what we do or the labels we put on ourselves just so we can be accepted. It's better to continue being ourselves and then just let them find the quality of our songs. But I hope that made sense. I'm not saying that I fully agree with that, with dropping the K in K-pop, but I do feel that there has to be an effort to correctly categorize, especially BTS members, to their proper category. Because I don't think V should be competing in the pop category because his songs are not pop. I don't think RM should be labeled K-pop because his songs are not K-pop; they're indie. And I think if we do that, that's going to be the first step towards getting global recognition and global acceptance. Beth Good said, I don't have a problem with Grammys being local, but there is a need for a global award, maybe a whole other award system. True. I do feel that as well. It's just that I don't think, like, how are we going? Music is so, it's very much influenced by local culture, right? So I feel like, um, how do we even begin to 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 judge who the winner is going to be? Like it's so local, like it's so influenced by local culture. Larry said, I think Grammy is still fearful of artists like BTS. I'm not sure if it will work, but I would like to try it because the rap line should be competing with other rap artists, but that's just me. I think the hardest is actually, I think it's going to be easier for for Jungkook and for Jimin to get into pop than it is for the rap line to get into hip hop because it's so like attached to the culture of and the history of African Americans. So I mean, to this day, when Eminem, whenever he wins, it's still like a whole, it's still a whole issue because it's so ingrained in their culture, right? So I think it's even going to be harder for Asians to get into that category. I do think RM is more indie though. Because I have the Bio Explorer said, because I have a few newly immigrated Hispanic students in every class with limited English, I always try to sneak in Latin songs in our classroom background playlist, but other students whine. The competition, Apobangpo, the competition in the US is quite cutthroat. Yeah, and also just want to make it clear that I don't necessarily want them to join Hollywood. That's the last thing I actually want them to do. I mean, if they want to, that's their decision, it's their life, their career, their bodies. But like preferably if it's my call, I don't want them to ever get into Hollywood because of for obvious reasons. We now know like slowly all these scandals are getting into the spotlight. Like all of these things are getting revealed and they're not pretty. So that's definitely not an industry I want them to be in. Instead, I just want them to be able to freely make music and actually be categorized properly. But I do want them to create their own industry.